entering the Mayo experience.
That Mayo experience. That Mayo experience. That Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by DraftKings. Week 1, Thursday Night Football, Bills at Rams, DraftKings Showdown Picks, DraftKings Showdown Strategy. As well, we're going to walk you through the tools, what the basic idea is for Showdown, how you can make yourself different, how you can get yourself to the very top of the leaderboard, plus breakdown of the game, an early breakdown of the game on Mayo Media Network. I think we're going to have 2 more opening night previews. I know that Tyler Tambolini is going to have that on fantasy football picks and bets, plus the props that go along with it. And our guy, Big John Legazia, is going to have the jock market breakdown, plus his favorite bets for the game. So we're going to have this covered from all aspects. You can expect those for every island game this season. I'll be, actually not Sunday night. Sunday night's a weird content time, but you're going to have me for the Monday night preview, Tambo and John for the Thursday night preview, and then we're all going to be tackling the weekend slate as well from a props and DraftKings perspective. So smash the like to the episode, sub to Mayo Media Network, tell some friends about everything that's going on as well. And if you want to play in the best tournament on DraftKings, Pat Mayo Experience Open. It's open right now. It's more than half full already. It's for the main slate on Sunday in week 1. $75,000 of rake-free guaranteed money. You can get 3 entries. They cost $15 each. That link is down in the description. Plus, I'm giving away $1,000 in week 1. So all you need to do is sub to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast at Stitcher or Spotify or Apple. Leave a 5-star review with your Twitter handle and email in it so I can contact you. Say something nice and boom, you are in that draw. Although, I'll bring him in right now. Justin Freeman from RunTheSims.com is on the line, and I think that everyone, Justin, should go get their sub to Run the Sims right now. And if you use RunTheSims.com/Mayo, you get yourself a discount because, I mean, I love it for the main slate, although I've won more using Showdown and using the tools because I'm just oblivious to a lot of the stuff that goes on. But people are going to want this in week 3, so why wouldn't they just get it in week 1?
Exactly. Yeah. Hop on in. The water is warm. And honestly, no better showdown tool out there, in my not so humble opinion about this. Like, this is the way to be thinking about playing Showdown. People who have used our tools have had great success playing Showdown. So yeah, we've tried to make that as easy as possible, give you enough knobs and levers that you can pull yourself, be in control of your own destiny. But overall, like, it's fun. We've got a great community coming up over there. No need to wait till week 3, Pat.
Yeah, you don't want to wait till week 3, most definitely. And like, I would highly recommend that. I mean, the whole site is based on, I mean, it's Run the Sims. It's going to simulate the game. It's going to simulate the slate. I mean, many times. How many times is it now? Is it 1,000? Is it 10,000?
Yeah,
what are we doing here?
10,000 times behind the curtain. And when you run it yourself, you'll get 5,000 simulations here for every Showdown slate. So you're getting a lot of, those great lineups bubbling to the top. You'll get to see how frequently they occur. And that to me is like the real power here, is because Showdown's not about players. It's about lineup combinations and how can you get creative in putting some of those things together. So, you've got, we've obviously got some studs in this game. We're going to want to try to jam in as many as we can. But then comes the second layer of Showdown. This is where things get really interesting, is you're thinking about, well, if I do this and everyone else does this too, because it's an extremely popular thing to do, then like, how am I going to actually profit? Because I'm not going to get past those people. People are going to duplicate my lineup. And, even when I win first place, instead of the $1 million up top, I'm going to be winning a couple $100. And that's not the sort of risk reward we want to take on. So sort of going down to that next level is sort of applying that game theory, understanding that we can mix in some guys who, while they're not as likely to hit as some of the more popular options, when they do hit, we get immensely rewarded. We get disproportionately rewarded. That means we are going to take home solo $1 million, or we are going to split it with just a handful of people up top. And that helps you be a long-term winner when you're talking about Showdown.
Do you think you've won more money on Showdown or the full slate of a weekend?
That's tough, because I'd say week to week, like, I can expect more Showdown profitability. Like, I find the swings to be much less variant than the weekly games, but I've had some recent large swings in the weekly that have kind of probably pushed that back up towards the top. But stable year long, like, if you told me I could only play one, I'd play Showdown.
Well, is that because Showdown is an easier math problem to solve where you might have, hell, 11 games on a main slate, 22 teams, all these different players, only so many different combinations, like almost unlimited combinations that you can have trying to fill out all those spots, where with Showdown, you have one game, you have a set amount of players, you can only fit so many into a 6-person lineup, only one player can be a captain, then you can just do your different combinations off of that. So do you think it makes it easier from that respect if you do understand both the math and the game theory behind it?
Yeah, you nailed it, Pat. Like realistically speaking, it is an incalculable number of options that exist for a classic slate. For a showdown slate, we're talking a player pool that's maybe 50 players long tops, and really once you sort of strip away guys who have no chance of seeing the field, guys who will be inactives, guys who are going to pop up on injury reports, we really whittled that down to really maybe 20 or 30 viable options on a really thick slate. So there's only so many different ways you can slice that up. And so the field gets sharper every year. Every year the field gets a little bit sharper. We understand how often we should be playing quarterbacks in the captain, how often we should be playing receivers in the captain. And it is tough for some of those quarterbacks to bubble up. But the thing is, the field has gotten pretty wise to that. And so the swing back and forth is understanding, well, as the field leans more and more towards any one strategy, there becomes value in sort of zigging while they're zagging, right? And sort of counter adjusting. So you can get lost in the sauce when you start thinking about the different layers that you can apply here. So what I like to do is maybe more of a lower volatility type of exercise. And that's tend towards playing the lineups with the better chances of winning. And so I mix in a little bit of ownership criteria in there as well. And so that way I feel like I'm not punting away too much edge in terms of actually getting to first place, but also making sure I'm avoiding those mega chops that exist at first as well.
Well, for people who don't know, I mean, you say that the field is getting savvier. I'm not getting savvier. I mean, talking to you is making me slightly more savvier, which is a huge accomplishment for someone like myself. But if I'm just going in blind, like what are some rules to live by? Like you mentioned quarterbacks as a captain. Is that something we don't want to do?
Yeah, typically we don't want to do, but we'll actually talk about this game and how there is a player who tends to break some of those rules. What we don't want is a true pocket passer, typically in the captain spot. So if we're talking general rules of thumb here, obviously there's exceptions to every rule, but like Matt Stafford is playing Josh Allen here. Matt Stafford, while he could be a tremendous flex play, get you the type of score that you need to qualify into your lineup, he's not a terrific captain play because typically when Matt Stafford has a great game, he's sort of filling up the cup for, I guess, pun unintended, for one of his, targeted playmakers. In this case, most likely to be Cooper Kupp, right? So if Matt Stafford has, a tremendous game where he scores 25 fantasy points, like we'll take that, we'll lock that into our lineup. But if he scores 25, I can go ahead and tell you Cooper Kupp probably scored 30. And so that changes the math on who we should expect to be in the captain, because in that captain, we're getting 1.5x on our score. So that 30 from Cooper Kupp now becomes 45. And now you needed him in that captain spot to win on a slate that looks like this. So you're wanting quarterbacks who don't, guarantee sort of one of their pass catchers exceeds them in total score. And that's where Josh Allen's really interesting, because we know Josh Allen can run the football. So there are opportunities for him to score that don't also benefit one of his teammates, unlike Stafford, who we would expect to be a major dog to ever have a rushing touchdown, right? So Josh Allen, he gets 50 yards on the ground and a rushing touchdown. That's 11 points that went strictly to him, not to his pass catchers. That's going to help vault him into a captain spot. So yeah, overall, we tend to like receivers. We like running backs who can catch passes. Obviously, this is DraftKings, full point PPR. We want guys that can hit some of those 100-yard bonuses. Those are the things we want. We really typically want to try to get that highest scoring player on the slate in the captain spot.
So I think that some people might make the mistake of saying, well, if I use this, and it's not to say that I can, I think that this all has to be put with the caveat of, Matt Stafford will be the most viable captain sometimes, and it's just not a higher probability situation than we want when we're filling out these lineups. Like, I have a feeling that when people open the DraftKings scoring for the showdown week 1 and like Isaiah McKenzie's kind of cheap, it's like, well, if I put Isaiah McKenzie in my captain spot, all of a sudden now I have the world to play with. But that might not be the best strategy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes playing those cheap guys can be a bit of a trap, and really you're wanting those guys to really blow their expectation out of the water. Because if let's say even Isaiah McKenzie, and McKenzie's priced at $2,400 this week, let's say he gets you 10 fantasy points, that'd be really point per dollar wise a pretty tremendous outcome for a guy you paid $2,400 for. I mean, which is very close to the $200 minimum price, essentially free, right? So for that price, that score, fantastic. So you may be thinking, well, if he's going to do that, then I can throw him in the captain, and then I could fit in maybe one more stud that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. You're really trying to thread a really thin needle if you do it that way. So I would say you're probably overestimating your ability to nail the remainder of that combination. And sometimes it seems relatively straightforward. You're like, oh, I go McKenzie, that lets me get to Allen, Stafford, Cup, and one other tremendous player or something like that. But I would say that's still like, you need McKenzie to hit in that situation. And you need the other guys to not do so well. Like, you need Cup to have a good game, but not a spectacular game, because if he does, then guess what? You needed Cup in there. So yeah, I think it can typically be enticing. You'll jam in more projected points that way. But in terms of like really finishing top 1% or, number 1 overall in your tournament, I typically want to stay away from those tremendously underpriced guys.
Yeah, just to go back to what you were talking about in the Josh Allen, Matt Stafford situation. I'm on DraftKings Sportsbook right now. See if I can throw this up on the screen. See what this looks like here. There we go. So you can see that if we kind of scroll up a little bit, you'll see that, where is he at? Matt Stafford. Can't even find him here. Oh, yeah, because he's at the bottom of the page. Plus 750 to score an anytime touchdown, a rushing touchdown, or I suppose a receiving touchdown in this context in this game. And then if we scroll up, you got Josh Allen right there at plus 170. So really, the implied odds are like 4.5 times more that Josh Allen is going to score a rushing touchdown versus Matt Stafford, to kind of emphasize that point. Even when you get into, obviously, Isaiah McKenzie has different ways to score points, be it through 8 catches for 134 yards and a touchdown or no touchdown. But we're just looking at pure touchdown scores. Obviously, you get a lot of points for a touchdown. That's what you're really trying to mine here, that he has the same odds as Jamison Crowder. He has slightly better odds than Darrell Henderson. Now, I expect him to be better than those guys, but the one that really caught my eye here was Tyler Higbee has like a pretty significantly higher probability of scoring a touchdown than Isaiah McKenzie does. Now, is the volume going to be there for Higbee over Isaiah McKenzie? I mean, it might be, but he seems more likely to score a touchdown, and that's a player that I just don't think that anyone is going to go to. But just with all the, like, week 1, I feel like the season-long hype on players for best ball drafts, season-long drafts, that all gets factored into the week 1 ownership, and then it kind of goes away.
Exactly. Yeah, you'll see those guys that everybody was high on headed into week 1 start to really have their ownership impacted. And what's funny is, like, you may like a guy like Isaiah McKenzie because of the price that he was going there in drafts, but this is completely irrelevant. We have to reset expectations completely. And there are some interesting things. Like week 1, we have as little information right now as we'll have all season long. Like, we have no idea how the rotations are going to look for any of these teams. We can sort of judge based on how last year looked and what sort of archetypes were used to replace players. But yeah, like, you make a great point that we are chasing touchdowns. We want every single touchdown we can get our hands on playing Showdown. If we don't get those touchdowns, a lot of times you're chasing the rest of the game. Like, if Higbee scores a first quarter touchdown at 5,600, and he's probably good for another 4 catches for 40 yards or something like that, a really sort of pedestrian rest of the game, you're going to need him at $5,600. So yeah, I think sort of checking out some of those markets, understanding which players do lean a little bit more touchdown heavy is a fantastic way to go. And then think about what that also tells you. If Higbee scores a touchdown, if I just give you that piece of information before the game starts, and that's how we're going to sort of build this lineup. That's the story we're going to tell. This is a Higbee scores a touchdown kind of game. Well, there's one of maybe the 3 or 4 touchdowns the Rams are going to score in this game that's going to go to Tyler Higbee. That's one that goes to Matthew Stafford, sort of by default, right? So he's included. That's one that does not go to Cam Akers or Darrell Henderson coming out of that backfield. It's also one that's not ending up in Allen Robinson's hands or Cooper Kupp's hands. So it helps us sort of understand who are the primary beneficiaries when this one thing happens that we really want to happen. But yeah, let's sort of reset expectations kind of across the board here.
So one more thing to go into it. So quarterbacks, unless it's a running quarterback, not your most likely captain or probably best captain. Is there a rule of thumb between wide receivers and running backs as we think about it just on a general basis too? Like, maybe it's team dependent. I don't really know, but I always feel the inclination to play a wide receiver in my captain spot.
Yeah, it's just so much easier for wide receiver to get there. If we're talking about some of the really dual threat, running backs in this league or guys with just monster ceilings, we're talking about those guys that are first round picks in your fantasy drafts. Those are the guys who you can justify playing in the captain spot. Christian McCaffrey can, really blow a slate away. But as you look around on this slate, Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson, we're talking about some sort of split existing there in the LA backfield. We're also not super confident in how healthy those guys as we talk here today. And then on the Buffalo side, you got Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, James Cook, really a three-headed committee possibly forming there, just not enough upside. So while I could expect that James Cook may evolve into some this type of player that we're talking about, if he can work his way up the depth chart, a guy who can catch passes and run the ball on the ground. Maybe about week 7 or 8 or something like that. But yeah, right now, as you sort of look at this slate, there's not that archetype of running back that we're looking for to justify a captain designation for, unless, we're just kind of going under this assumption that the game is going to be very underwhelming in terms of how many points are scored across the board. But Vegas certainly doesn't think so. This game's got an insane total of 52.5 right now. Buffalo's favored by 2.5. It screams shootout. So, that kind of helps you understand how you should be building those lineups.
So when it comes to like defense, kickers, that kind of thing, do we, not so much in the captain spot, but just in general, like unless it's a weird game situation, like if we get that Bills Patriots game that's played in minus 80-degree weather, it's like, all right, well, maybe the defenses can do well in that circumstance, because sometimes you'll see the defenses pop in, the kickers pop in winning lineups. It always just seems to be some really bizarre outcome, though, that was probably not on anyone's prediction palette.
Yeah, exactly. When you're talking about making those types of plays, either A, you're doing it because you don't know any better, or B, you are really chasing some very outlier outcomes, right? And you're going to have a huge bankroll to be able to survive some of those swings. And typically the field overplays kickers and defenses in the captain spot. So as of right now, I think you could feel comfortable just Xing those out. Try to stick to a script that can still, like, if you think about a bell curve of how the game could possibly unfold, like stick within the meat of that bell curve. And there's still lots of unique ways to create lineups within the thickness of where those expectations lie heading in.
So a few things before we jump into the game. One would be, do you have any recommendations for people outside of using the runthesims.com tools to make you better? Completely customizable, by the way. We'll get into that here in a second. /Mayo for the discount. Like, I'm going to throw out a friend of the show, friend of mine, friend of yours, Cody Main at Establish the Run, someone who does some really great showdown work. Are there others that we should be paying attention to?
I mean, there's lots of people who are starting to work their way into this showdown content space. Cody definitely comes to mind. It's funny, he and I kind of seem to keep crossing paths. Like, we're the USFL guys, the XFL guys, we're the showdown guys. But I love the work that Cody does. He does a fantastic job. There's some guys over at Numberfire who are doing excellent work for single game slates as well. So there's a lot of fantastic content out there. And we try to do our best to make sure that you have the tools that you need, but it always helps to sort of bounce ideas off the crowd. Hopping in the Discord at Run the Sims is actually a fantastic way to say, hey, am I crazy, or could this actually happen?
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of Pat, you're crazy in the Discord, but then I learn. And I mean, USFL is the most profit I've ever made on any single league, sport, whatever it might be. And I couldn't name you 3 players in it. I just trusted the system, trusted the projections. Your projections were fire for that. But I found myself playing like 50, 60. I wasn't maxing the 150. I was playing 50 to 75 lineups per contest, and then I just started printing money. How big of an advantage is it to play the 150 or 100 lineups in NFL Showdown versus playing 150 lineups on a main slate? Because it seems to be a much bigger advantage because you can actually cover so many combinations.
Yeah, it is. You just want to, I think sort of the difficulty for playing tons of lineups is ensuring that you feel good about every single one. You don't want to punt away any, negative EV lineups in your whole portfolio. And it can be tough to make that decision across the board. And so we try to make sure that we limit that as much as possible. The way we sort our output when you run the Sims here for a showdown slate, you're going to get the best lineup in terms of most likely to take home first place, sorted from top to bottom. And so you'll have that information. So even if you're getting it in, with a few too many dupes, that in the long term could have like a small negative impact, but on a week to week level, you're going to have a tremendous portfolio of lineups. Really, if you just sort of take the sort of chalk that we're offering. And but I would definitely recommend going in there and mixing up some game scripts. Like, make yourself, if you're going to play 150 lineups, make yourself 20 where like Josh Allen stinks, make yourself 20 where, Jamison Crowder goes bananas, make yourself 20 where, Zach Moss actually was the leading running back in this game, go through a few different possible game scripts and, give yourself, some chances to uncover maybe some angles that other people aren't thinking about. And if you sort of take that approach and build a portfolio each week that takes some strengths, that I feel pretty confident that you'll come out good in the long run. The question is, can you survive for that long, right? Because you can go through some pretty killer downswings. I just tell everybody, play within your means, play within your bankroll. If you're going to play 150 lineups, start in the mini max, right? Start for a quarter, start for 50 cents. And take that $75 buy-in instead of the $2,250 buy-in that it would cost to play sort of the main event most weeks.
Well, that's something that Tambo and I talked about we're going to have the DraftKings like main slate strategy show just overall before we get into the actual week 1 minutia. And that's going to come out, I believe, on Sunday or Monday. So probably just following this episode. You can stay tuned. And Tambo and I will be talking through all of this. And one of the things that he hit on, he said, basically, unless people came into the daily fantasy DraftKings space with a ton of money on the outset, everyone he knows who is a pro player, who's good, all kind of did it the same way. They started in those maybe not 10-cent tournaments, but 25-cent tournaments. They started in the 50-cent tournaments, and that's where they learned how to play all of these lineups, how to get good. And it wasn't killing them week after week if they were, max entering and losing $75. Like, it's not fun to lose $75, but like you said, it's much better than the alternative when you start losing $3,000 per slate.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting, even when you get to a level where you can afford to, take that kind of swing at the ball, like all of a sudden you lost $1,500 this slate, $1,500 the next slate, and $1,500 the slate after that. And you've done nothing different. The same process that got you there is just running a little bit cold. So definitely caution that bankroll management, because even like the best players on the planet go through major downswings. It just happens. So live within your means for sure. And keep evaluating your process. Be sure not to over adjust your process and chase whatever was winning last week. Be like, it took a defense captain to win last week. I better start making 50 lineups with defense captain. Like, no, don't over adjust. Just make sure you're sort of properly adjusting to themes and patterns that you're observing in your own play.
Let's jump over to runthesims.com right now. Once again, runthesims.com/Mayo will get you that discount, and we'll jump into it. So, there's NASCAR, there's F1 projections, UFC's coming soon. How close is UFC, do you think? Months?
I think probably within the next month or two. I'm hopeful, at least. The optimizer is actually working right now, trying to get a simulator that would be very similar to what we're about to see here for Showdown also going. So you can go in and change, fighter win odds and stuff like that, and lock players in. So it's going to be really fun. I think it's a different approach than what everyone else is doing for MMA.
Well, if you're fans of Brett Apley on the Mayo Media Network or the Dogger Pass podcast on the Mayo Media Network, runthesims.com/Mayo. Sounds like a great way to get in on that once it drops. So for showdown purposes, we're going to go into the NFL DIY simulator. And we'll go to the HQ and you'll have your list of options. Now, what you can do is go into each individual game on the main slate if you'd like and play around within there. But we're just obviously going to the DraftKings Captain Showdown mode for the opening game of the season. And this is what we're going to see. We're going to, the projections that you have in, I'm guessing, Justin, are based off of what the spread and what the totals are, right?
Yep, exactly. So for some of the stuff across the top where the teams are located, like Buffalo Bills, points scored, that's coming directly from the total and the spread of that game. The pace, rush rate, and touchdown ratio, those are all run the Sims based numbers. So, we're looking at historical tendencies. We're projecting out for this new offense and what it looks like, and basically starting with a baseline assumption of like, most of the time we expect it to kind of look like this, right? And so the beauty of simulation is that it says, well, yeah, most of the time it looks like this, but a lot of times it doesn't. So what if we just throw in a little randomness and see what happens? And so that's the fantastic thing, is like, you've got all this information both on a team level and a player level. You click one magic button that says run the Sims, and you're going to get some pretty fancy output there in terms of how likely each player is to hit the winning lineup. You'll get custom downloadable lineups that you can toss right into DraftKings and all of that. But really, there's a lot of numbers here that are generated by us and our projections team at Run the Sims. We're diving into every news nugget we can get our hands on. There's a rhyme and reason to every number sort of across that grid there. And you're obviously welcome to change anything that you disagree with.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do here is, like, this is going to be the standard, the standard of what Vegas is telling us, or what sportsbooks, DraftKings sportsbooks, let's say, are telling us, is that, 27.5 points for the Bills, 25 for the Rams. That's going to get us to our 52.5 total of that game. But let's just run a few scenarios where I think the Rams win this game. And I think it's a bit lower score. I think it's the Rams and it's the under. That's the story that I'm going to tell. Now, I'm not going to adjust the pace stats or the rushing rate, although I probably should for something like this when I start adjusting the score. But I just want to adjust the score a little bit. So let's say the Rams win 24-17. Now, I mean, in this scenario, if the Bills are running 66 plays at a 39% rushing rate, that rushing rate probably goes down a little bit if they're down by that much in the game. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click save over on the right-hand side. It's just off screen here, just like here. I'll even move it over for people. You can see it up here. There's the Run the Sims button. There's the save button. Sometimes when you do the screen share, stuff gets a little bit out of whack, but that's okay. We'll move it back down a little bit. So I'm going to run the Sims on that particular score. And you can adjust it any way you want. You can adjust you can just run it as it is a lot of the time. So this is what it's going to give us. It gives us the optimal results, and still in this, Josh Allen and Cooper Kupp, Stefan Diggs, Matthew Stafford come out as 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll give you your captain's percentages, although it's really funny. In this situation, with the score that I've put in, Cooper Kupp is actually going to be total owned less than Josh Allen, but higher in the captain spot by a pretty significant margin, 24% to 17%.
Nice, yeah, and what's funny, on my computer, I've got the sort of baseline, so I have something to compare against there, and that's quite a bump. That's a 5% bump up for Cooper Kupp and his captain spot. So basically, what you've told the machine there is there's going to be less touchdowns to assign to Bills players here, and so if Josh Allen is not a threat to rack up tons and tons of touchdown opportunities like he is apt to do on any given slate, that's going to really ding his ceiling outcome. And so, that makes total sense. Kupp's expectation doesn't change at all. Josh Allen's goes down quite a bit, as does the touchdown expectation for really any of the sort of pass catchers or weaponry at all over on the Buffalo side. So, that makes total sense that you could see sort of those Bills start to fall down in value. That's exactly what we would expect to happen. And so while, the Rams offensive expectations didn't really change, sort of the interaction and what makes a tremendous lineup does change. And that's how you get to those different numbers there. And that's how Kupp elevates over Allen.
So, like, in the baseline, what does Cam Akers come out at? Because I would feel like if Cam Akers, I think that Cam Akers is very interesting on this slate because everyone's afraid of Cam Akers. at the moment because they don't know how much he's going to play, how healthy is Cam Akers. I don't want to play Cam Akers, have him run the ball once and come out of the game forever. But that also feels like a really nice buying opportunity on a huge upside player, especially in a score like this. Now, I'm not saying this is what I think the final score is going to be. I can adjust this a whole bunch of different ways. And what I like to do with the simulator for Showdown is give me one Rams win score. Give me one big win for the Bills. And then I'll play like 4 guys on one side for the Bills, 2 for the Rams, and then even flip it, weirdly enough, because I think that's where I had all my success in USFL Showdown was, you know, I would only use like 2 or 3 players from the winning team and use 3 from the losing team and just hope that the losing team was super concentrated in all the points that they had. And no one really wanted to stack up and use that many players from the losing team. But there are certain game scripts where, you know, if everything is concentrated on both sides and you can hit all of those goalposts, you're going to win.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's exactly what the way to use the tool is to go through those alternative scripts. And, you know, you mentioned Cam Akers. He comes out at 33% in the flex and just a smidge shy of 8% at the captain for about 41% ownership, exposure levels there for us combined. And so I would expect that in this type of script where we're seeing less production on the Bills side, we would expect Akers production to climb a bit from that 41%.
So you had 41%. It's 43.6% in this simulation, and it's a 9% captain rate.
Yep, exactly. So it's bumping it up a little bit. You'll see. I think another way, if you're trying to get stronger Rams lineups and you're wanting to ding the Bills and what's probably a pretty inefficient game, hammering that pace on the Bills side will also give you some better outcomes that are more Rams favorite. Like instead of the 66 plays per game that we say the Bills are going to run, changing that down to 60 or 58 or some number like that, that's really going to limit the total offensive volume that we expect. And a lot of times I will try to like do those in lockstep with one another. When I drop a total, try to drop that pace somewhat proportionally to that. So that way we're getting, sort of, a type of, balance there that makes sense. Like we don't expect a high pace with low points scored. They typically work in lockstep with one another.
So I just adjusted it to 58 plays for the Bills and 61 plays for the Rams at the 24-17 score. I'm going to run the Sims again, and now we'll see if that spits us out anything differently this time around. It's amazing how fast these simulations are. Like we're running it 5,000 times with custom simulations. It takes like 5 seconds to run.
Yeah, it used to take me literally an hour to do any one change to this. So 5 seconds, quite an improvement.
So Cooper Kupp goes to a total rate between captain and flex of 71% now. And then it goes Kupp, Allen, Stafford, and then Akers passes Diggs. And Diggs is still right around that 9% captain rate, but his flex rate is like 38% all of a sudden. But that's because our inputs on... Let's see, Cam Akers right here. We have him getting 56% of the market share of rushes. We have him at 62% of the market share of rushing touchdowns, 10% of the overall receiving share. You can minimize those down. If you think that Cam Akers is hurt and he's not going to really play all that much, I mean, we can't really speak to that at this moment. He could not even play in this game for all we know. Yeah. And then Darrell Henderson, I'm not entirely sure it looks like he's going to play, but how healthy is he? If you just wanted to switch those up and say, hey, I think Henderson's going to get 60%. And basically just swap Henderson for Akers or Akers down to the Kieran Williams spot and put those stats in for him and put Darrell Henderson at 70%, all of a sudden you're going to have a lot of a different situation here. So let's put Henderson at 60. We'll just put him at 60%, and that leaves Akers at 29%. And we'll just kind of swap them here. We'll go 27%. That's 2%. 27% for touchdown rate. And we'll go 61% for Darrell Henderson and just kind of swap them in terms of receiving rates. So we'll go 5% and then 10% for Henderson. If you think, and obviously not everyone's going to think that, and hell, I might not even think that. Oh, now I can't even run the Sims. What did I do here? Oh, I got 102% for... There we go. We'll drop that down to 27%. Make sure our exposures at the bottom all equal 100, so it makes sense. So in this situation, what would you think that Darrell Henderson's going to come out as?
Oh man, see the thing you got to consider is Akers is 8K and Daryl Henderson, how much? 4,800. So that could really make him pretty popular there, especially in the captain as well. It's going to unlock quite a few things. So I think let's see, I've got Henderson at 17% as a baseline. He's got to be pushing like 50% probably here.
He is pushing as a flex play. He's pushing. He is 53.3% as a captain. He's 15% in this specific scenario that I just adjusted. But that's just to show you can kind of tell the system anything that you want. Like if you have a beat on this game and you think I think that's where like really, if you are able to properly cap a game and you have like ultimate conviction, I never have this conviction on anything, or else I would be like printing money betting on stuff if I think the line is that far off. But if you have your own modeling where you're like, wow, this game is off by like 3 or 4 points, and then you can tell Run the Sims that story, all of a sudden you can build these showdown lineups with a ton of leverage. And the great thing is too, like if Cam Akers is ruled out last second with like an hour to go, hour and a half to go, just jump on, put him to 0, allocate everything else elsewhere, and you have your 150 lineups that are way better than everyone else's.
Yeah, and the awesome thing here, Pat, is second half and fourth quarter showdowns. This can be really a print fest because to go in here and select the second half slate for this Buffalo Rams game, you're looking at your watch. There's 5 minutes left to go in the second quarter. You've kind of seen a lot of things unfold. Like, holy crap, Jamison Crowder is the starting slot. Everybody thought it was McKenzie, but it's really Crowder. And, Allen has eyes for Crowder. And so now you're just going to go in and blow up the market share for Crowder. Or, it wasn't Akers, it was Daryl Henderson. Or the third wide receiver wasn't Ben Skoranek, it's Tutu Atwell. Or whatever the like weird thing is. Like, we know weird stuff is going to happen here. Like, go in, make those adjustments for your second half and fourth quarter showdowns, and you could really make big edges on the field that way.
When do those slates usually get uploaded into the system?
A lot of times on game day. So we'll get those usually probably like Thursday morning they'll come in. So yeah, they're not up on DraftKings just yet.
Yeah, until the actual salaries come out, there's nothing we can really do with what is going on. So
yeah, exactly. The good thing is like DraftKings keeps the salaries exactly the same. So whatever you see is what you get for the main slate. So if you're like looking, Josh Allen's 12,000, he'll be 12,000 on the in-game showdown stuff too. It's a lot of fun, honestly, and you probably got a bigger edge that way too.
Oh, 100%. And I bet you week 1 in Super Bowl are the 2 weeks where the prize pools are the highest on DraftKings.
Yep. So hit it hard.
Yeah, I reset the baseline here for all of the numbers. I'm going to run the Sims just to see if we can get some picks. And I think this is something I like to do on our full slate optimizer as well, just to see where there are so many people that just will play the optimal lineup, like big stakes players playing in their 3-person contest, 10-person contest. And that's generally the best way I find that you can kind of suss out ownership in a weird way. Like I ran the Sims for week 1. Obviously, once we get all the information, injury news, some of the projections are going to change. But it does seem like everyone's going to pay down for Jalen Hurts and Daniel Jones as their quarterbacks this week. Like that's the common cheap build.
Exactly. So it can be challenging on that main slate to think of contrarian ways to come off of that. But hey, the more consolidated ownership gets, the easier our decisions end up being.
So here's the optimal results as we ran it. Justin was talking about these before. You have Allen, Kupp, Diggs, Stafford. Isaiah McKenzie is third. Then you have Cam Akers. Mainly because Isaiah McKenzie is $2,400. That's going to really... He's the guy that I feel like fading Isaiah McKenzie, like it might be a terrible strategy if he goes off, but he just seems like such the player to fade. Hopefully he has a bad game because he's going to be like 70% owned.
Yeah, and 60% of the time he's not in the winning lineup. So, if he's going to be 70% owned and only going to hit 40% of the time, then, we don't want any parts of him. And obviously we'll know a lot more by next Thursday. He's a little banged up too. So we want to keep our eyes on those sorts of things. But this is a perfect way. And we'll have ownership in by Thursday also. So we'll have a way to compare like what we expect the field to do versus what our Sims say to do. And we have a handy dandy little column there, total leverage, that tells you whether a player projects to be over-owned or under-owned in that particular contest. We get projected ownership on every one of the island games here for DraftKings. So we can go in and we don't have to really guess a whole lot. Like as long as we feel like our assumptions are correct, we can pretty much rely on whether these players are over or under owned. It doesn't mean we have to exclusively play under owned players, but it gives us a lot of context, like to make sure we're not jamming in 6 guys who are, all going to be way too heavily owned.
So you can get your projections from the simulations as well, which these are going to be the median projections for everything?
Yep, exactly right. So whatever game script is that you just keyed in, you'll see how that changes. That could be a helpful way to add a little context. Like for me, I'm seeing, just north of 40 yards rushing on the ground for Josh Allen, 295 yards passing. And there's some really cool lines out there right now. Like Prize Picks has some awesome lines for hitting those different player prop markets. So you can go hammer those. DraftKings Sportsbook has lots of really cool lines for hitting those prop markets. You can compare those right there based on sort of what you expect is going to happen. I'm seeing Josh Allen 295 passing yards, Stafford 254 passing yards. First thing I'd like to do is pull up DraftKings Sportsbook and see where they have the lines for those and see if we see any edge.
Yeah, so Josh Allen over under 274.5 passing yards, and we got him at 296. That's a pretty big over based on the baseline situation that we're talking about. 269.5 for Matthew Stafford, projected out at 255. So over, under. Obviously, just because someone is projected out at 30 yards over, that's a good spot to be in. Doesn't mean it's not necessarily going to win. I think people need to understand that context to it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like even when you're building your DFS lineups, we can put ourselves in good position. Doesn't mean that at the end of the day, once the dice hit the table, that it's going to come out to our advantage.
So the last thing you can do is you can click on the custom lineups that you've put in, and you can go different build types. Like if you want to do the 3-3, so it takes 3 Rams, 3 Bills, and you can make sure you can put in whatever captain you want. Like, hey, I want Cam Akers Rams 3v3 lineups. What are those going to look like? Then there's the frequency of the simulations. How many simulations does it build out? Is it 5,000 on this one?
5,000 for sure.
So these 2 lineups are the most prevalent at a 5,000 lineup. So this one comes up 5 times. This one comes up 5 times. You can see Isaiah McKenzie is in both. I don't want to play those ones. So I need to go down to, and he's in most of them because he fits. So now I need to go down to the one that's a little bit different. Like, do I want a kicker? Yeah, I don't know about that so much. But now we're at like Akers, Skroenek, Josh Allen, Diggs, Cooper Kupp, and James Cook. Like that feels, although it uses all the salary, that does feel like a pretty unique lineup to me.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's the challenge is to find ones that can be unique. So if you found one, I would tend to want to play that.
Yeah. And
I would say also, Pat, like that max salary button is a really handy way to make sure you're cutting down ownership. If you are going to be a large field player, go to max salary, type in 49,000, and see what you get then. And it's going to reduce the frequency number by quite a bit. Like you're not going to get as good of lineups anymore once you start limiting the salary. But these are combinations that can hit together. 5,000, well, it sounds like a large sample size, is kind of small, honestly, in the grand scheme of how many different ways a contest can play out. But it's a great way to make sure you're not overly duplicated, because still most players are very much drawn towards playing a lineup that spends right at max salary.
Yeah, and it's super easy. You can just download the CVS. You can parse through it all you want at runthesims.com. And even, I'll throw this in here, we have the NFL Prize Picks tool, which is going to come in handy for our Prize Picks show on Mayo Media Network, where you can just kind of go in and you can see this is just built in, like what is the favorite on all of these. This is fantastic. Plus, it has the value calculator over on the right-hand side as well, if you want to go punch in how much you want to wager versus the legs versus the odds. It'll give you the odds to sweep, how much a power play is going to hit, how much a flex play is going to hit. And I mean, a lot of the times that the Prize Picks over-unders, I mean, we like to catch the soft ones that have an 80% win rate for the simulations, but they're pretty dead on a lot of the times too with what the DraftKings Sportsbook over-unders are going to be within a few yards. And maybe a few yards changes everything, but if you're really into props, this is a great tool that you can go into, and it's all based off those simulations.
Yep, exactly. It's going in on an hourly level, rerunning our numbers, rerunning the Prize Picks numbers, and getting some really cool stuff there. Hopefully we can get some more integrations built out. Like as betting becomes bigger and bigger, like we want to have a bigger and bigger footprint and helping people beat some of those lines as well. So lots of fun stuff in the way in the future here, but really, really pumped to sort of demo that tool here this year.
It's funny because like the top 8, the above 65% plays for Prize Pick in week 1 are all unders, which should be shocking.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, everybody comes in with their favorite players and everything. It boosts those lines up. And so, if they're trying to balance action, we'll gladly take the unders and the expected value.
All right, Justin Freeman, thank you for being on runthesims.com/Mayo. Are you doing any content throughout the year, or are we just going to have to have the projections and follow you on Twitter?
Yeah, it's just the projections and stuff. We've kind of built out our team at Run the Sims to we've got a new guy, Nolan Hubler, who's helping us with projections this year, and really excited about that. But as far as content goes, I'm taking it easy. I'm relaxing a little bit, Pat. It's I feel like I've got so many balls in the air keeping these projections airtight that it's tough to find time to get in front of the video and the mic and put the good stuff out, because I did enjoy that. I will say, like, anybody who's ever done like 3 shows a week can very much tip their hat to what you're doing. I mean, you're an absolute machine when it comes to putting out content, because it can be tough to get really excited about Titans Browns week 11.
Yeah, it all just becomes part of the job at some point. But I really appreciate you coming on. Anytime you want to come on, talk Showdown, talk Run the Sims, I'm here for it. So you just let me know, okay?
You got it, man.
All right, that will do it on the Pat Mayo Experience. Remember to sub to the channel on YouTube. And if you want to get in those giveaways, I told you about the audio play in the DraftKings Listeners League. Go win some money, print some money with runthesims.com/Mayo. If you use the /Mayo, you'll get it for under $13 a week for the NFL season. Come on. What are we doing here? Like, you know how much you're playing this. If you're playing $5 a week, then you probably don't want to have it. It's not worth it for you. But if you're playing like $100, $200 a week or way more, then yeah, you're going to want to have runthesims.com. So go over there right now, use code Mayo or /Mayo, get that discount right now. Thank you all for watching week 1 content. This is kicking it off. It's going to be fun. I'll see you next time.
Mayo experience! Experience!